Hello and welcome to the Doctor in Yellow channel. My name is Kiraj and I am the guy in yellow. It is good to see all of you. I hope everybody has been enjoying a productive start to the week. And even if the week has been heavy so far, I am sorry about that, first of all, but also glad that you have made time to spend with me. Always am grateful for that. But today I wanted to come on and talk about something I've been thinking about a lot lately, which concerns empowerment. And this is coming from conversations that I've had with people individually and with experiences that I've seen online and elsewhere, where people are communicating that sometimes after their experience receiving a reading from someone else, whether that is a one-on-one consultation that they had with someone in person or online, or whether it's watching a video reading, an asynchronous video where you have a reader providing a group reading, which can usually be found on social media. A lot of people are saying that after having the experience of those readings, they feel worse. They feel anxious, they're afraid, they're concerned about the future, they feel uneasy, they feel disempowered. And I believe all of that comes back to making sure that you feel empowered going into a reading and exiting it as well, so that when you do exit it, you feel that you have the autonomy to bring about the goals that you want, that you are empowered to take the action that you need to take, and that just generally you feel better than when you went in, even if the message that you received is one that wasn't super easy to hear. So these are just a few points, four specifically, that I felt would be helpful, and let's get into it. So, point number one is to remember that you bring knowledge and wisdom to the table. You know your life, you know your mind and your heart, you know your goals. You have a wealth of experience. You bring all of that to the table when you are receiving a reading. And so you are not an empty vessel simply to be filled by the knowledge that the reader has. You are bringing your own knowledge set to the table. I think what happens a lot of times with queerants is that they will approach a reading feeling as though they know nothing, that they are that empty vessel that needs to be filled with information and perspective that they don't have, that there's nothing in them. And conversely, the reader is the one who has all of the knowledge, all of the insight, all of the wisdom to then impart to the querent. Therefore, the querent can rationalize that it's their responsibility to leave the things they know behind and simply accept what the reader has to say without it being a particularly collaborative experience. In my opinion, what that creates is a power imbalance where a person can disempower themselves by feeling as though they really have nothing to contribute to the experience and giving that power to the reader exclusively, trusting them implicitly to give them the knowledge that they need or that they feel they need at that time. But always remember that you bring so much to the table, all of your experiences, all of your spiritual wisdom, all of the insight you have into the way that you operate and the way your mind works and the decisions you're likely to make, the goals you're trying to reach. You have all of that in you. And so you always have the autonomy to present that to a reader to make it a more collaborative experience. It's not a situation where you're just there to listen and just accept whatever's told to you. You have wisdom of your own, and that wisdom is incredibly valuable. Now, this makes me think specifically about my experience as a student. So those of you who have watched some of my previous videos may know that I am a doctoral student. And when I first entered the program that I'm currently in, I was nervous because I had never done this level of work and research before. I had never had experience around researchers who are doing the type of work they are at this high a caliber. And it was intimidating. And I was approaching that situation with the understanding that I know nothing. I'm forgetting about, everything that I've experienced and know because I've never done anything like this before. So I'm just going to leave that and I'm going to go into this program trusting the facilitators of the program to impart the knowledge that I need. But what I was doing by telling myself that, even though it was unconscious, was disempowering myself because there's a tremendous amount that I bring to the table. My work experience, my experience as a scholar, all of that I was bringing to them. So I had just as much of a right to feel as though I belong there as anybody else. I feel like that same principle can be applied to tarot readings. You bring a wealth of knowledge to the experience, and so you don't have to treat yourself as though the reader is the only one who has knowledge and wisdom because you do as well. So please keep that in mind. Now, the second point to keep in mind is about giving yourself the credit that you deserve when it comes to your ability to handle unpleasant information. Now, I think this applies to a lot of us who work with the tarot, where we're familiar with the cards, we know the meanings, the imagery, we know the archetypes, we know how those archetypes work with each other in a spread, and yet, despite that, there are still some cards that come up that we're not super excited to get. That's just what it is. That comes with the territory. That's perfectly fine. I would personally make the argument that most people who work with the tarot have at least a couple of cards they're not thrilled about to get in a reading sometimes, but that's totally fine. What I think is important to keep in mind is that remembering you have the strength to deal with that unpleasant information can help go a long way in allowing you to remain empowered when receiving readings from others. This is coming from having observed a lot of queerants who will receive a message from the cards that is a little bit uncomfortable. It doesn't really sit that well with them and kind of freaks them out a little bit or makes them anxious. And so what will happen is they will go to another reader, or they will go to another video if they're using social media to engage with another group reading, and see if the message that they get with that reading is different from the unpleasant one that they got before, because they might say, I just can't deal with that unpleasantness right now. I just want something that sits a little bit more easily on my mind and heart. And I totally get that. I understand it. It's natural, it's human to want to receive encouragement or reassurance that everything will be okay. And when you receive a message that makes you feel uncomfortable or concerned, it's natural to want to seek out a different message. However, I would make the argument that when we do that, we are subconsciously telling ourselves that we're not strong enough to handle unpleasant information, when in fact, we absolutely are. When we're going from one reader to the next, one video to the next, whatever format we are using to receive those messages, and we are not stopping until we land on a message that is basically what we want to hear, what the implicit message is in that whole process is that we're not strong enough to handle this unpleasant news. We can't do it. We can't bear it. It's too much. But you are strong enough to deal with it. And it doesn't have to be something that brings you down. That in itself can be a source of empowerment, realizing that you're able to hear that information and apply it in a way that can benefit you. So rather than running from something that initially feels a little bit unpleasant, you can tackle it head on and surprise yourself with what you're capable of achieving thereafter. This actually makes me think of it, not to insert too much of myself into these recommendations, but this makes me think of when I first started with the tarot years back, where the very first reading I did for myself, and I know I'm talking about readings for other people, and this is a reading I did for myself, but the principle is the same. The very first reading I did for myself was a 3-card reading where I got the Tower. I had learned about all of the card meanings. I knew all the majors, all the minors. And I said, I just don't want the Tower. That's what I said to myself before I completed the reading for myself. And I got the Tower on the first reading. That freaked me out so much that I actually got a different deck and completed another 3-card reading and got the Tower with that one too. So the first 2 readings I ever did for myself, the Tower was in both of them. And so I quickly learned I'm just going to need to learn how to be okay with with stuff I'm not super excited to hear. I had to get used to that very early on. The Tower and I became fast friends, for better or worse. And so I think When you give yourself that opportunity to just embrace that initial discomfort, you'll surprise yourself with how much you're able to handle and the extent to which you're able to just get comfortable with news, information, or messages that may not have been what you want to hear, but may ultimately in the long run be what benefits you the most. Now, point number 3, this has to do with the readers themselves more so than the querents. And this is about not allowing a reader to impose an interpretation onto you that you know is just simply not correct. Unfortunately, there are some situations where querents will visit a reader. The reader will share information with the querent based on what they're seeing in the cards, and that information may be completely incorrect based on what the querent already knows. However, the reader might be reluctant to acknowledge that they just did not get the interpretation correct. And I understand that can be difficult for some readers to do because you want to make sure that your readings are accurate and that they're resonating with the querent, but sometimes they're just not right. That's just the territory that comes with the territory. That's just what it is. Not everything can be accurate all the time, but what matters is what you do after that. And a more collaborative approach is working with a querent to say, hey, that's not really accurate based on what you're telling me. So let's pursue a different path. Let's see what else these cards could mean, because I initially interpreted them this way, but it turns out it might be this instead. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. What is not healthy is when a reader is not they're not comfortable saying that they just got something wrong. They're not comfortable saying, I thought that was correct, but it's not. And what they will do instead sometimes is they will try to impose the interpretation onto the querent when it's just not right. What becomes more unhealthy about that situation is if a querent is unwilling or uncomfortable to let the reader know that that interpretation is not accurate. So if you have a reader who's telling you that you are going to reconcile with your abusive ex next week, and you're like, absolutely not, that's never going to happen in a million years. Or if you have a reader telling you anything that you just know in your mind or heart is just simply not true, you can empower yourself by sharing with the reader, hey, that's not exactly correct. Can we pursue a different path instead? Can we reevaluate this? Can we look at a different interpretation of these cards? Because I know for sure that's not it. And a reader who is performing their craft ethically, in my opinion, will be more than willing to open up the experience to have it be collaborative in that way. But the main point here is never let a reader impose anything onto you that you know isn't right. And again, that also pertains to readings that you're receiving asynchronously with a reader on YouTube who might have recorded a video for you to watch later. Make sure that anything that you're hearing in that reading, because a lot of times they'll say, take this if it resonates with you or leave it if it doesn't, especially if it's a group reading. So in those situations, know that you are empowered to say, hey, I know that's not right. I'm not going to let it affect me and make it seem like something that I need to be stressed about. I know it's not accurate or applicable to my situation, so I'm going to leave that. That is a way of ensuring that you empower yourself. Now, the fourth point is about remembering that you are in control of your life and your decisions. And I say this because many querents who receive a reading will hear that information and hear that knowledge and feel like there's nothing that they can do to change a particular outcome, specifically if the reading concerns a future event, but this is applicable to the present moment as well. There can be this sense of, all right, this is what is going to happen. I just need to let it happen. And there's nothing that I can do. And even though I feel like there's a certain grace and peace about just rolling with the punches and, whatever comes, it comes, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But it ventures into disempowerment when you feel like you want to take a particular action, but that you can't. And that's never true. But whether you want to follow the advice or not, whether you want to take a certain action or not, whether you want to make a certain decision, take certain steps, reconnect with a certain person, pursue a certain opportunity. You have that autonomy at all times. The future is never something you just need to let happen. Same goes for the present. You don't need to just let that happen, whatever's going on. Realize that you are in control. Now, of course, it's human nature to simply want to know what the future holds, to have that certainty, to know what's coming. Everybody wants to know what is down the road, what is going to be lying on the path before us that we're going to have to deal with. That is the human experience. But there are measures that we can take to ensure that when those unexpected things happen, that we're dealing with them in a level-headed way, and that no matter what information a reading might convey, we maintain control over our lives and our decisions, and therein we can find a tremendous amount of empowerment. Now, let me know in the comments what you think about this topic. If there's anything that you do to maintain your sense of empowerment when you are receiving readings from other people, I'd like to hear your thoughts, what your spiritual practice entails, and what your ideas are. And as always, I enjoy speaking with you. I hope everybody has a wonderful week. We'll connect soon.